Hayes County stand for?
Hey Hayes, welcome to our very next episode, episode 2, where we're going to talk about what the fentanyl with Mark Andrews. And you probably have seen him before because he was part of our teaser, but I didn't feel like he was worthy enough to be the first person.
That's rough. That's rough, but I'll take it.
It had to be Sheriff.
I know.
And don't let him lie to you, because
Sheriff deserves it.
He's going to pretend that this is our first time doing this, and I told him I was going to call him out.
By the way, speaking of calling out, I did see that you threw me under the bus in Sheriff's podcast.
I said you were kind of a good bowler.
Oh, well, I appreciate that part, but I know who you were talking about. So.
I figured. So we're going to be talking about fentanyl. Mark is actually the one who does the fentanyl presentations to the Hayes County schools. And I felt like it's a really important topic, especially as a parent. You want to know what your child is learning in school. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, so obviously everybody knows fentanyl is a huge problem, and it kind of culminated itself here in Hayes County in 2022. In the summer of 2022, we lost 5 students out of the same school district within a few weeks. So at the time, I haven't been on the streets in a while. So drug use is very much like technology. It evolves so quickly that it's hard to keep up with if you're not involved in it on a day-to-day basis. So I didn't really know what fentanyl was. I didn't know how it was.
I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I didn't know how it was affecting our youth. So in 2022, I got asked to learn everything I could about it, tell as many people as I could about it. So that's what I did. So, that we've been on an education push since then. So my job is to pretty much go around and talk about fentanyl.
And you do it with the Forever 15 project.
Yeah. So Janelle Rodriguez and her husband Brandon are the founders of the Forever 15 project. They lost their son Noah, was one of those students in 2022. We met them by happenstance. We were at a press conference about a fentanyl arrest that we had made, and they showed up just as curious parents, like, what is Hayes County doing about this crisis? And we told them we were going to try and put something together. We were going to put a program together and go talk to people, and they were more than ready and willing to jump on the train and get it done. So we do a fantastic presentation. Many of you have seen it. We've done most of Hayes County schools. We travel around and do it at tons of schools. So,
and it's a really good presentation. I've only seen it once, but the kids were really interested in it. Obviously, it's a little sad, but it is important because there has been younger kids getting themselves involved with it. Luckily, we haven't had any issues recently, so that's good. Do you think there's a reason why?
Well, I like to think that the education that we're providing is causing the downtrend. We have experienced a downtrend in Hayes County a little bit, but it's overall the education as far as how to, what to do in the event of a poisoning. The use of Narcan has increased, and our fatalities have decreased. Kids are, it's never going to go away. We've been fighting the war on drugs since the 80s, and it's just a war we're not going to win. But we want to win battles. So, and that is, education's a big thing. And when I go into, I approach the students in kind of a different way. Students don't want to hear a police officer stand there and talk to them.
Yeah.
That's probably the most boring thing they could even think of is to be preached at by a cop. So our goal is not to be there as police officers. I'm there, number one, as a parent. I have 2 daughters. Could easily be me being the parent telling my kid's story. And we recognize that. We know they don't want to talk to counselors and principals and teachers and stuff like that. But I let them know that I'm a dad. I'm also someone that loves and cares about somebody that is affected by addiction. My brother, unfortunately, has a methamphetamine problem. I share that with the students, that I'm there as someone that knows what addiction's like and has that in my family. I'm not there to judge. I'm not there to tell them what to do, what not to do, or say no to drugs or any of that kind of stuff. Simply to share the facts of fentanyl and how crazy dangerous it is. It's just,
It's a very tricky one because it's so easily laced with stuff and hidden, like in candy, liquid,
yeah,
powder, pills. And I remember there was a case where half a pill had fentanyl, but the other half didn't. And so a couple split it, and one unfortunately got affected by it, and the other didn't. So it's just one of those things that it's very tricky and it's hard to be aware of.
yeah. So what, going back to the history of how fentanyl has become such a big problem here is the people responsible for manufacturing illicit narcotics.
Right.
Well, I'm talking street drugs like marijuana, methamphetamines, heroin, those kinds of things, realize that fentanyl is so extremely inexpensive and so extremely powerful that if we could put fentanyl in our street drugs, we then make a superior product, right? So they started doing that and realized that it worked. Well, they then realized Americans love pills. America has a problem with prescription narcotics, hydrocodones, oxycodones, Percocets, all the opioids. Well, fentanyl is a man-made opioid. It's made in a chemical lab. It's extremely cheap. So
they actually use it for cancer patients too.
Yeah, it's been around since the 60s and it's still used in a hospital setting. But what they figured out is they can take fentanyl, they can mix it with powder, baking soda, whatever it is, put some food coloring and press it out to look identical to our pharmaceutical pills here. And that's the main problem we're seeing in Hays County is counterfeit pills. They're not pills at all. They're just powder and fentanyl. We don't know how much is in there, where it's at in that pill. So in my presentation, we tell several stories of what you just said. People splitting pills, crushing them up, snorting them, and just having no idea what you just ingested.
And you gave a really good presentation for visual people on how much is too much fentanyl. Can you explain that really quick?
Yeah, so the DEA came up with a great slide. It shows approximately 2 milligrams of powder on the end of a pencil. I don't like that slide too much because
it's very hard to see.
It's hard to see. It's hard to imagine, but when I show it in the presentation, it's on a screen.
Yeah.
It's 10 foot long.
So it looks more.
It looks like so much.
Yeah.
So, 2 milligrams is a fatal dose. Well, we take a sugar packet, a sweet and low packet or a sugar packet that you'd find on the dining table at a restaurant. That's 1,000 milligrams. I pour it into my hand and share that that's the equivalent of 500 fatal doses.
And that's just like a sweet and low packet.
Yeah. Not even enough to sweeten your tea, right? You need more than one. But
you might need more.
But 500 fatal doses, that's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, 5 or so grains of salt. It's just an absolute minute amount.
And that's why it's so important for us to be bringing awareness to these kids, because it was a trend in Hays County. Hopefully it doesn't come back as a trend as it has calmed down right now. But they're thinking that they're getting a painkiller. They shouldn't be doing that in the first place, but this is what they think they're getting, and then turns out it's laced. So it's just a scary situation overall. I mean, I've even heard kids getting edibles and it's still being laced.
Yeah, so fentanyl comes in powder and liquid. There are cases of it in vapes now, and that is terrifying to me because 60%,
that's so scary.
60% of kids vape in our schools.
That when I was with the SROs, that is the biggest issue that they run into right now is getting vapes from students. Like they had a bucket just from 2 days and it was full. Like it was crazy. So that's really scary. Do you have any advice for parents right now on, obviously it's really hard to keep your eye on your child when it comes to these kind of things, but do you recommend any advice for them to possibly help prevent it?
I asked the parents in my presentations if they still have the owner's manual for when their kid was born, and it's kind of a joke because being a parent is one of the hardest things in the world.
Yeah.
Rewarding, yes, but one of the hardest things. And, we ask people, well, did you notice changes in your child? Well, yeah, there are changes. But we all experience that because of a thing called puberty, right? As a parent, it's hard to distinguish, okay, is this is this puberty that's causing these changes, or is this maybe some drug activity or something like that? But there are some signs to watch for, a change in friend groups, a decline in grades, decline in hygiene, things like that. But as far as a recommendation for parents, your kid cannot be afraid to talk to you. I tried to raise my kids, and I'm by no means a perfect parent, um, knowing that they were safe to tell me when they messed up. They knew that there would be consequences, but they weren't afraid to tell me. And if you don't, you have to have a line of communication with your kids. You have to give them that feeling of confidence and safety for them to come talk to you. And I think communication is probably the biggest thing you can do for your kids, but sharing with them the dangers and, you know, going back to, I'm way older than you.
Oh yeah, I know.
I don't look it, but I'm way older
Remember
than
when you just had a birthday, and I found out when you started working here. Just fun fact, I was 7 years old.
Yeah, that's scary. My point of saying this is my parents, and probably your parents even, could experiment. And that's a thing that teenagers like to do, is experiment. But the days of experimenting with drugs are over.
And kids are so fearless these days. Like,
they're invincible. They feel invincible.
It feels so long ago that I was in high school, but in reality, like, it really wasn't that far away because I was still in college for 5 years, and so it's still kind of figuring out my stuff, going through growth and changes like they were. And from when I was in high school to now, I'm terrified to even talk to a student now.
Yeah, it's like like I said earlier, as quick as technology moves, that's how it, and that also affects what's going on. That's
this
part
is
of
a
the problem.
topic that I want to bring up that might make some people kind of mad, because I see a lot of, I don't want this on social media, or they'll be trying to be like, oh, I can't believe kids are doing this, and it causes a lot of talk. However, parents aren't doing anything. If you don't want your child to see it, why are you not having more control over their social media? And that's one of the things, is making the reason why they are doing these things is because they have such an easy access due to social media. You can add a random person on Snapchat, like, you'll just get recommendations, and you don't know who it is or who you're talking to.
Yeah, I think, the drive is to have as many followers as possible, right? Or the most amount of likes or whatever it is. And I'm not the social media guru. I do know that our kids know more about social media than we will ever know. My age group will ever know.
You're the one that told me about an app about how they can hide things. And it's like,
but I have to take special classes for that. Our kids just know it, right?
Yeah, and I didn't know that was a thing, and I'm still in that generation. Like, I thought I would know.
Well, I tell parents that if you pay your child's cell phone bill, it is not your child's cell phone. It's your cell phone that they're merely borrowing. And 100% of everything illegal is bought and sold through social media.
Yeah.
So drugs, narcotics, sex trafficking, human trafficking, slave labor, stolen credit cards, counterfeit money. It's all in social media within, 3 minutes from where you're at right now, delivered. And that's a terrifying, eye-opening thing. And our kids know it.
Yeah,
our kids know it.
And they abuse it. And that's why we're running into the issues that we are now. And a lot of it, their attitudes are coming from media and what they're seeing online.
Yeah.
Just the way they act. So it is a scary situation. It also doesn't help that TV shows and movies kind of highlight those type of things. And so they're like, oh, I want to try it too. So that's just where a stopping point comes in. As a parent, it sucks having to be the bad guy, but it's for their own good.
I've tried to talk to my kids, and I'm like, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation about this. And they hate it. They're like, oh, Dad, this and that. But it's so worth it. It's so worth them knowing that we know, and that their best interest is in our hearts. That's what we want, the best for them. But you can't. I don't want a parent to feel guilty that something goes wrong, because we cannot be there 24 hours a day,
At
7
the
days
end
a
of
week.
the day, it was their decision.
It's a decision that they make, but
Yeah.
we are just, our goal is to guide them in making good decisions, to at least think about the decision they're making. And that's how I approach my presentations is I just want you to have this information in your pocket for when the time comes that you have to make a decision about what you're going to do. I'm not here to tell you what that decision is. My kids aren't perfect. They've made a lot of mistakes. Uh, and because a child makes a mistake, I don't think it's necessarily bad parenting. I think, there used to be a stigma attached to the druggies. Like we knew who the druggies were.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case anymore. These kids are normal, regular, good kids.
The most innocent kid is doing the absolute worst, and you have no idea.
That are carrying far greater stress than ever before.
I don't even understand how they're getting access to vapes. Like, the things that I saw when I went with the SROs, I'm like, I didn't even know how to get access to this when I was in high school.
It's so easy. It's so easy. It's frighteningly easy to get your hands on this kind of stuff.
But they don't even know what they're buying.
No, they don't. And it's so normalized. It's just...
because it's a trend. It's not because they want to do it. It's because everyone else is doing it. And that's what's scary.
Yeah. And then it creates that addictive problem. So it's a hard situation. It's just something that I have a goal to keep doing what I'm doing. I just want to keep educating. I want to be there for our youth. I want to give them resources and an outlet that they can handle.
Well, you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Spreading awareness. I did my own little research here. I don't have my glasses on because the glare. But so if your child or someone you know or loved one, a friend, you notice some changes, these are fentanyl side effects. If you think or have the expectation that someone is using, these are things to watch out for. Headache, pale skin, insomnia, swelling your hands or feet, sweating, a rash. I know those are really like general symptoms, but if it's constant, then obviously something's wrong, and it's okay to sit them down and talk to them. And then overdose is drowsiness, weak pulse, fainting, slow breathing, and those are also really hard things to just catch on the spot.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we're an advocate that everyone should have Narcan in their home, because it may not be your kid. It might be a friend. It could be anybody.
Or even in your car.
Reach out to the forever15project.org. They can supply you with a free dose of Narcan. But when you see these signs and symptoms of a poison or an overdose, use Narcan when it's necessary. The good thing about Narcan is you can't overdose anybody with it. Mm-hmm. If they're experiencing something other than a poisoning, some other medical issue, it won't hurt them to give them Narcan. So that's important to know. It's used like Afrin. It's like a nose spray. But reach out and get it. It's available over the counter at most pharmacies also. But have some in your home because of the sheer numbers of fentanyl out there. It's astounding how readily available it is.
You recently did another podcast with TMPA.
Yeah.
That right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? You guys can go check it out.
Yeah, check it out. TMPA, they had me on as a guest to talk about specifically what Hays County's doing to represent or to fight fentanyl. Mm-hmm. I was partnered up with a founder of another project, and we just talked about, law enforcement obviously is an enforcement thing. Here at Hays County Sheriff's Office, we have kind of a two-prong approach. One is education, and the other is enforcement. So we have our guys out there that are going after the dealers. They're trying to find out where it's coming from, and they're doing good work. My personal personality is more of education. Mm-hmm. I'm not a big arrest and write tickets to everybody guy. So if I can get in early and let these kids know that I'm there as a listener more than, a punisher.
And I'm gonna
That's
say
kind of,
his presentations have been so like effective that even after the presentation, we'll stay and some kids have I've seen it will come up to them and say like, "Hey, this is going on in my home." They feel safe after that presentation, which is so important.
yeah. And that's our goal. That's our main goal is and we tell ourselves if we could save one, then we did a good job.
Yeah.
And I think, especially Janelle, Janelle with the project just brings it home. She makes it what it is and gives these kids an outlet, and they use it. They reach out, and to see the reactions is mind blowing every single time.
Well, if you want to know more about the Forever 15 project, I'll put a link to it and you can read a little bit more about her story. And then I'll also put a link to the podcast that he did recently. It's really good. And so was the mom that you were with. Her story is amazing, honestly. And I think it's a perfect example of why this is so important because it's a case where she thought she handled it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, surprises happen. And I think as a parent, it is something that it's the dark side of being a parent.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for
thanks
being
for
here.
having me.
If you have any more questions, feel free to comment down below. We'll try to get to them. And then stay tuned for our next episode.
Thanks, guys. See you, Hayes County.